Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode of As the World Churns. Danielle and I are thrilled to be here and thrilled that you're all joining us, assuming you're all joining us. For all we know, we're talking to ourselves. We have no idea yet. But I'm going to assume that you're all joining us from the new abnormal. And yeah, so this is As the World Churns. It's going to be not too dissimilar from the new abnormal. We may add some segments, make some tweaks. We may solicit opinions, fun stuff like that. Crowdsourcing, I believe the kids call it, Danielle.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say.
yeah. Um, but yeah, we are here to continue what we had been doing for the previous bunch of years. And with that, Danielle, please
Take it
add whatever
away.
you would like.
Folks, I'm glad that you're here. It's super exciting for us to be on YouTube so that you can see our sarcasm on our faces and not just in our voices. So, without further ado, the world is churning. So, let's get into our first point of discussion, Andy, which is Donald Trump
Well,
is the fucking Pope.
yeah. Uh, so, you know, in the last few days, obviously the conclave is getting going over in Rome. I'm headed there right after we finish recording. So a couple days ago, whatever, the Trump campaign thought it would be cute, clever, whatever, to post an AI generated photo, i.e., not a photo, of Donald Trump wearing a Pope's outfit, complete with a meter on top of his head, I believe it's called. Big old cross around his neck, the white robes, the grace. There's a bunch of different ways to look at this, and one is just to roll your eyes and let it
Hmm.
slide and say, yeah, this is dumb, whatever. Another way is to say, don't say anything because they're trolling. They want you to say something. But Danielle, as we were talking before we started recording, there is meaning behind this stuff, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And I think that the fact is, one, we can't just roll our eyes at this because it's not a joke, even though the Trump administration seems to think that everything is a joke. It's not. And number two, look, this is about distorting our reality. This is about putting Donald Trump in the same breath, in the same space as someone who has absolute religious authority and power. So Trump starts this idea of him being this supreme leader, right? And Lindsey Graham then is just, I guess, seconds that emotion because that's what bootlickers do. So he does this and then it takes off. And it takes off in the most absurd way. But again, it isn't just about the absurdity. It's this idea that Donald Trump and his sycophants see him as this all knowing, omnipotent being, right? That can assume as much power as possible. And so for them, this is not out of the realm of possibility. It is something that God himself has intended. I mean, did you see, Andy, the visual of these white evangelicals singing Amazing
Yeah,
Grace,
yeah,
praying over Donald Trump? Like,
yep,
that wasn't AI. That
yeah.
wasn't AI generated. This is what these people see as this imperfect tool that they imagine Donald Trump to be in order to execute their idea of this white nationalist Christian reality theocracy that they want the rest of us to live under.
Oh, for sure. And that's why, as you said, like people always say, "Oh, it's a joke, lighten up, whatever." It is very instructive that every one of these joke AI images of Trump, and we're going to talk about a different one later in the show, they always put him. It's always the huge muscles. He's swole. He's in a position of power. There's not a hint of self-deprecation. And this is a common thing, I think, for conservatives that they do not. I don't want to blanket it, but it's pretty blanket at this point, and it's absolutely a blanket thing for MAGA. They have they can never poke fun at themselves.
Mm-mm.
Everything that they do has to be, making them larger than life, making them the power center. And again, all of this is reflected in the policies that they favor. And whether it's going after LGBTQ plus folks, whether it's going after racial or religious minorities,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's, just in general going after brown or black people, everything is to center them as the power with a capital P in this country. And so this really is of a piece with that. And yeah, you could say, don't make too much of it, but it really does fit everything that they do perfectly. And you see this. I mean, at Danielle, as you brought up before we started recording, this is perfectly of a piece with what Trump said over the weekend
Yep.
when he was on Meet the Press and he was
Mm-hmm.
asked if he thought it was his job to defend the Constitution, whether it was his job to make sure that due process is given to every person born on American soil. His response was, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure, call me crazy, but when you swear an oath, right, as president of the United States, which I just want to remind folks that on Inauguration Day, Donald Trump did not put his hand on the Bible when he was taking the oath of office. That is not just a casual aside. That was purposeful. So that's number one. Number two, when you do take the oath, you say that you are going to what? Uphold the Constitution of the United States. And so everyone from a toddler, right, knows that what do presidents do? They protect and defend the Constitution. When Kristen Welker asked Donald Trump, isn't it your job to, uphold the Constitution? And his response is, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I need to check with my lawyers, is to place inside of us this seed of reasonable doubt as if, oh, the Constitution isn't a given, that it's something that, like, you can maybe sort of decide that you don't actually want to uphold, and like the president gets to do that.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be, it's not a Chinese menu with a column A and a column B, and you pick and choose what you want. Like, you don't get to pick which amendments or which articles you want to follow and uphold and protect and defend. It's sort of a package deal. It's the whole Constitution. And the I just everything he does, I know it's a fool's game. I think, what if Joe Biden did this? Then I really think, what if Obama did this?
Oh,
Can you
please.
imagine if President Obama had been asked about whether he needed to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and he said, I don't know, check with my lawyers. Can you imagine if he had put out if his campaign had put out an image of him as the Pope? Can you? I am just look. I worked at Fox News during the Obama presidency. I cannot even imagine what that building would have been like if either one of those things had happened. But Donald Trump, all these conservatives who for all these years kept talking about the Constitution and kept reaching into their inside coat pocket and saying, I carry a pocket Constitution with me at all times. The reality is they could not give a shit about the Constitution. They never could. What they cared about was putting a black man in his place.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so obvious how much of that supposed constitutionalism was an absolute farce.
It's a farce because let's understand that it is a fool's game to say, what if Biden, what if Obama? But it's also important to remind people how actual presidents are supposed to act, right? Like
Mhm.
what is considered, to have decorum, right?
Right.
Like the things that used to be posted via social media from the White House was not a game or a joke. It was
Yeah.
serious because the office of the presidency was serious, right? And what Donald Trump has done over the last 9 years, not just the last few months, but the last 9 years, is desecrate that office and turn it into a fucking joke, right?
Let's move to another one of these garbage AI images that was posted by the Trump administration. This one was posted on May 4th, which probably most of you know is Star Wars Day. If you don't know that, it's because of the phrase "May the Force be with you" and "May the Fourth be with you." You get it. So they posted a picture of Donald Trump wearing like a Jedi type robe and again, huge, bulked up, and carrying a lightsaber with a red blade. I had to check with Seamus Calder, our resident Star Wars expert, on that. So they posted a picture of Trump dressed as a Jedi with a lightsaber in his hands. And the post read, I'll just read it: Happy May the 4th to all, including the radical left lunatics who are fighting so hard to bring Sith lords, murderers, drug lords, dangerous prisoners, and well known MS-13 gang members back into our galaxy. You're not the rebellion, you're the empire. May the 4th be with you. And again, as we said earlier, so I won't go into it again, you could treat this as a joke. We're not going to treat it as a joke because there's a message behind all of this. And again, it's first of all, they somehow think they are the rebellion,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yes,
which is bizarre for an
correct.
organization or for an ideology that holds both houses of Congress, the presidency, and the Supreme Court.
Yes.
That's a weird looking rebellion when you're in charge. I don't know. Call me crazy. I'm a little bit of a linguist. I don't think you can be the rebels if you're the ones that are in charge, but I digress. Danielle, I'm just going to take the point you made with the Pope thing because it's very,
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm-hmm.
similar. This is about constructing a narrative. This is
Yes.
about taking these movies in particular, which feature a rebellion fighting against an empire and an emperor who very much could be read as fascists, Nazi-esque iconography. And this is the Trump administration trying to tell you that that's the left, that the left in America is the empire, as opposed to the actual people who use Nazi iconography and follow policies that are much similar to that of a fascist empire. So they're trying to flip that on its head, and of course, while they're doing it, Trump is carrying a lightsaber with a red blade, which is that color blade is a symbol of the Sith, who are the bad guys, and not a symbol of the Jedi. And some people think they fucked up. Danielle, you don't think so, though.
No, I don't. And I think that like you have to understand that the Trumpism is about playing both the victim and the hero in their story, right? Like their white fragility is wrapped around this idea that white cis hetero men have been wronged, right? And have been pushed out of the narrative of America. And so their idea of reclamation of that, right, is them being the hero and taking back their space and owning their masculinity, X, Y, and Z. So to me, it's like they know what they're doing, right? Like they know how to conjure a narrative. And to me, what is really insidious about this image is this idea of this 78-year-old, massively overweight, never exercised a fucking day in his life, who eats McDonald's as a steady diet, who in every fucking interview you see or when you saw him in court is hunched over, can't stay awake at a fucking funeral, can't stay awake at a cabinet hearing, is somehow like Rambo from the 80s in their mind, is somehow this man, like the image that they are concocting is on par with what Nazi Germany did. It is on par with what Putin does. It is on par with what every autocrat has done to create this strong man image. How is it that the rest of us saw the interview, any picture, but most recently over the weekend with NBC News, see him hunched over, looking barely awake, talking to Welker in this interview, and that the image that they see is this one of Donald Trump with two bald eagles behind him and veins popping out of his arm. It's like, but the idea is that if you flood the zone, as Steve Bannon told them to do, if you flood the zone with shit, with these AI images, with these idea of Donald Trump, then you begin, right, to plant these seeds of doubt for people to question what it is that they see and hear. And that's all they need, is everyone beginning to question their eyes, question their ears. And then that's how you rush through your agenda. That's how you make it happen, is because everyone else is off kilter and completely and totally dizzied by this. And it just, like, the propaganda and the narrative is the point. And they are really good about, first of all, they put this out, and then what do the rest of us do? We have to talk about it. So we
Yeah.
repost the image, we repost the image. But the point that we're trying to make here on this pod is that these are not jokes, right? It is a larger political propaganda to center Donald Trump as the man of power, that no one should question his authority, his presence, or his purpose. He alone can do no wrong, like all of the action heroes that you have grown up on, giving young white boys this iconic hero to lust after. That's the idea, and it is solely around distortion.
And because we're very clever here at As the World Churns, what we're going to do now is tie in this Jedi image to a story about movies. And in fact, about Donald Trump announcing on Sunday that he wants to put a 100% tariff on any movies coming into the United States that were not produced here. And he mentioned in his little True Social statement that other countries offer incentives to draw production overseas, which is true. And then he went on to say, this is a concerted effort by other nations and therefore a national security threat. And then, and here's the key point, I think, here, he said, it is, in addition to everything else, messaging and propaganda. And so that, I think, ties into the Jedi picture and what you were saying, Danielle. And I should also point out, it was Danielle's idea to put these stories together because she is the clever one. But in Trump's mind, movies that are made overseas, and he's conflating because he's not smart here. He's
Correct.
conflating American productions that are made overseas with foreign films. Because otherwise none of it makes sense because he's doing that. Because first he talks about how the productions are being drawn overseas, which again is true. A lot of American movies shoot in Canada, wherever, because they get great tax incentives to do so. And it's a running joke in the film industry that Vancouver is like a city that has become a stand-in for any American city you want. But he's conflating that with messaging and propaganda, which again, these are American-made films on the one hand. So now he's clearly talking about foreign films. So the whole thing gets confusing, but the messaging and propaganda part play into exactly what they're doing here with this Jedi image. And it is, in his mind, these foreign films are propaganda. And he wants American films to be propaganda, but for America and for him. And so this is the MAGA conception of art. And it goes to an AI image of Trump with huge arms, dressed as a Jedi. That is propaganda. It's not subtle propaganda, but it's propaganda. That is how they view art. And that is what they want from movies. And so in their minds, there is something evil when about shooting movies overseas, even though that has absolutely nothing to do with the script for the movie, has nothing to do with the fact that it's an American director directing it and it's a Hollywood studio making the movie. But in his mind, if you're shooting overseas, somehow that becomes propaganda for foreign countries. So none of it makes sense. Danielle, even though none of it makes sense, make it make sense.
I mean, here's the thing. Look, I want to go back. It was like several weeks ago when we were talking about the fact that, you know, a majority of American citizens don't have passports, right? And how do you learn? How do you understand other cultures, other ethnicities, other issues? You do so through film and art and music. That's what you do. And what Donald Trump and this regime is doing is that they are taking control over the arts, whether they are dismantling the Smithsonian, dismantling the Kennedy Center, now going after Hollywood as a means of controlling the narrative and controlling the image and picture that they want to see, which is of white power being centered. Because his thing is that if you can bring all this industry back to the United States, which is not going to happen, because again, where are the incentives? Where is the ability for studios to be built and for production to happen at lower cost? It doesn't happen here. But it isn't just about, American films overseas. It's also about foreign films. It's also about presenting alternate ideas of what is happening in the Middle East, of what is happening in countries in Africa, what is happening around the world that is not American white centered. And the more that people learn and see and are able to travel through film and art, the more questions that they ask, the critical thinking that begins to build. And that is what authoritarians do not want. And so this is the beginning. But when you tie it, like we said, to all of these other things, the dismantling of the Smithsonian, the Kennedy Center, rewriting of education curriculum, the gutting of schools, when you take all of these things into account, it isn't just one siloed event. It is an entire takeover of what we see, what we hear, what we ingest, what we question, and what we don't. And that is the ultimate goal of Trumpism and of this autocratic takeover, is control over everything.
Absolutely. And look, just as a couple of quick factual points, I don't know how you put a tariff on movies. None of that makes sense. I don't know how you put a tariff. What do you do?
I don't know.
Yeah. The second thing is the mechanism that Trump is using to enact all these tariffs specifically excludes movies and a couple other things, but movies are among the thing it specifically excludes. So I know people don't want to hear this, but he can't do this. And in fact, the White House has already started backtracking a little bit, saying, well, we're looking into it, as opposed to what Trump said yesterday, that he said this was going to happen immediately. But the other point I want to make is, look, I worked in Hollywood for a bunch of years. I worked at the Directors Guild of America, which is the guild, the labor union that represents motion picture and television directors and the directorial team. And there was and there still is, as far as I know, there was a big movement to try to get production back to America because it means more jobs for Americans. And there are various states and cities that do offer tax incentives. If you watch a lot of television and we see a lot of movies, sometimes you'll see at the end of a movie a big logo for the state of Georgia. A lot of stuff is shot in Georgia because they offer good tax incentives. New York City does the same thing. Other states do as well. But there are foreign countries that offer much, much better incentives, and it just makes it a lot cheaper to film there, to make your productions there. But the answer to that is not tariffs, because again, I don't even know how that would possibly work. The answer to that is to give better incentives here in America for productions to be made in America, so that more Americans are employed. The vast majority of filmmakers would much rather shoot in America than go to Europe, unless the scene specifically calls for the setting is in Europe or Africa or Australia, wherever. But if the setting is America, I can think of very few filmmakers who would rather shoot in an overseas or Canadian city that as a stand-in for America. They would much rather shoot here, but economically sometimes they just can't. So this is one of those things, and I'm not handing it to Trump because he's dead wrong on all of this. But the idea of bringing motion picture production back to America is a good one. It's not his idea. Like I said, I worked at the Directors Guild back in the I guess the early 2000s, no, late 1990s, early 2000s. And it was a big push back then. So this has been going on for a good 20, 30 years. So anyway, sorry to bore people with my little bit of Hollywood talk, but I like talking about Hollywood.
So does
So
Donald Trump, because he
yes,
wants to be a star that he is
yes,
not. And
yes.
I hope that his Hollywood Hall of Star of Fame continues to be under construction, meaning that
Maybe there'll be a tax on films unless they have like Mel Gibson in them.
we'll see.
It seemed only fitting that my first guest for As the World Churns should be a fellow The New Abnormal survivor, and also the person who brought me into the wonderful world of podcasting.
Yes.
Molly Jong-Fast is the host of the Fast Politics podcast and a columnist for Vanity Fair. Molly, thanks so much for being here.
And an economist. I thought you were going to say I was an economist, and I got really excited. I was like, does this mean I know how to not
I
overdraft my
am here to
checking account?
please, Molly. So if
Yes.
you would like me to call you an economist, I will call you an economist. It's nicer than some of the things I've heard Trump call you.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay. So let's do, it's your podcast, so I'm not going to tell you what to do. That was,
okay, thanks.
by the way,
but there's a but
but-
coming after that.
No, it's so funny because it's like a friend of mine who's another mother friend was talking about how overbearing I am. And I was like, oh, she's right. It was like one of those moments where one of my kids was like, yeah, that's totally right. And I was like, oh, that is correct. She said to one of her kids, you think I'm overbearing? Get a load of this. And I was like, oh, that is correct. Anyway,
Well, instead of politics, we could just get into this. Why do you think you're like that, Molly?
no. First, I want to apologize for taking you into the world down the rabbit hole of podcasting, because you had a normal life before.
I did.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. My therapist thanks you though.
Oh,
It's money in the bank for him.
how much do you think you feature in other people's therapy sessions?
In other people's therapy sessions?
Do you ever think about this?
Probably very little. Is my
Really?
guess. I would think
Like-
so. Yeah.
How much do you feature in other people's couples therapy sessions?
A lot. A lot. Yeah. Yeah. She won't stop listening to the new abnormal. They used to
Normal?
say she's so excited about As the World Churns.
Churns. That's right.
He can't wait to see the video. He's so happy there's video now.
Yes.
A
See,
whole- A lot of that.
Andy
Yeah.
Levy,
Yeah.
yeah, breaking up marriages left and right.
All right. So because it's in my contract that I just made up, let's talk politics.
Yes.
I listened to a recent episode of Fast Politics,
Came
and
out
you
today.
had on the Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, and you asked her, or you said to her, a pretty normal question, I thought. And basically you were saying to her, hey, Democrats need to start, or candidates in particular, need to start talking more like normal people and stop reciting canned talking points. And am I describing that correctly?
So, look, this is a problem that I think became more common during the Obama era.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not blaming Obama for this because that would be insane. But what I would say is Obama's a very gifted orator. So you could talk to Obama and you could interview Obama, or you could hear him speak, and he would be so gifted that you would be like, wow, this guy told me a lot of stuff. When in fact, maybe he didn't tell you so much, but it didn't
Yeah.
matter because
Right.
he's so good at explaining things, at transmitting things, that he just could do it so well. And a lot of Democrats saw this and were like, this is how we should be. And the problem is Obama is a genius, right? Just a genius. Read everything, wrote everything, understands information, processes information, and speaks in a way that most of us just can't, including myself. So, what happens is instead of getting this sort of really brilliant explanation of the world, you get things right out of Veep. And I'm thinking of, and I've interviewed many Democratic politicians, and this has happened. And certainly there are exceptions. I mean, one of the great examples is Tim Walz just says honest
Yes.
stuff, which is why
Yes.
sometimes he gets in trouble. But you talk to him and you think, oh, this guy's really saying what he's thinking. And that is very refreshing. And one of the reasons I think Donald Trump got elected twice was because when you listen to him, you think, oh, this guy's really saying what he's thinking. Now, I also think he's this not saying what he's thinking, and often he is just lying. But it didn't matter because
Hmm.
people felt like he was saying what they were thinking,
Yeah.
what he was thinking. And so when you interview these Democratic electeds, a lot of times what happens is you'll say, so, you're in da 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 state, very, this, you're dealing with this, you're dealing with that, tell us how you make it work. And they'll say something effective like, America, we're a ca because we can. And you'll be like, okay, but please say real things to me. A great example is Mayor Pete. Mayor Pete goes everywhere, and Mayor Pete is extremely good at explaining things in a really salient way. And it doesn't matter that Mayor Pete is not telling you about what's in his heart because you are actually quite interested in what he has to say, and he says it in a way that's very clear. The problem is when you're just obfuscating and you're just trying not to break news, that in itself is not a sustainable interview model. So, what
Right.
happens when you interview this electeds, and I'm sure you've seen it, and I have absolutely seen it with my podcast, and I actually was talking to some cable news people who've also seen it. People hate watching it because they don't learn anything and they don't have anything to connect with. So I'm sitting there, I'm talking to her. She is in this very interesting state. It is a split state. It has some of the scariest stuff going on with the Michigan militia. The governor was, almost kidnapped. I mean, this is the front lines of what's happening in America. And I say to her, what are you doing? And she says, we're gonna protect the voters. And then she does 5 minutes on protecting the voters. Great. But when it feels so canned and it feels like she's telling me the same thing she's told everyone else, it's fine. And I am not entitled to more. But if we want to win elections,
Hmm.
we got to give people more.
Yeah, and it's not, it's not necessarily an indictment of the person as a person. As I was listening to your interview, and you went out of your way to say to her that you liked her and that you
I'd vote for
actually
her.
you would vote
I
for her.
want her to be governor.
Right. And basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to help them, but they're so resistant. And I don't want to pick on her now because,
Yeah,
as you
I
said,
think
this is
it's
a
a
much more
common
general
problem. Yeah.
problem. But they're so resistant to that, and they just want to say things like government is for all the people. It's we the people, all the people,
Right.
and we're gonna, and it's like, oh my God, in a world of Donald Trump's, you can't do that. And I think you mentioned Tim Walz, and I know we've talked about on our podcast, I'm sure you have, and a bunch of other people have, when he was first selected, he was unbelievable. And he
Yeah.
was the one that really helped bring about the whole, calling them weird and stuff like
Yeah.
that, which seemed to be working. People really liked it. People responded to it well. And then you could feel the consultants
Yeah.
tighten, like, it's like he was in a trash compactor and they just kept squeezing the walls closer and closer to
Yeah.
him, to make him to get rid of all that stuff and force him to be in their little, consultant tested lane. And it
Right.
took a lot of the wind out of the sails of that campaign, I think.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, look, the fundamental problem here is that we have the Democratic Party has been there's part of the answer process is that um we are seeing so the sort of McKinseyism,
Hmm.
McKinsey consultants getting in there and saying, don't say this, tell
Yeah.
the story of that. And it's funny because it's like 10 years ago when you had 10 newspapers and 10 networks and 10 radio stations, you would be able to do that. You would be able to go out and say, I was raised in a very working class upbringing. My mother was a doctor. My
Right.
father was a banker. We didn't have enough to eat, or whatever. I mean, obviously, if they're a banker, they had enough
I
to eat,
was
but you know
gonna
what I'm
say,
saying? Yeah.
yeah,
But like,
yeah,
he's a very bad banker. He was bad at banking. But,
right.
the point is, like, that people would sort of, they could speak in talking points and it wouldn't matter. But the problem is, we are in an attention economy now.
Yeah.
So you don't have, not every, you don't have millions of people at any one place except Joe Rogan. Except, right, you have millions of people at Joe Rogan, and that is about it. So what happens is you have to be able to cut through the noise. And you know what does not cut through the noise? Talking points, because
Yeah.
people just are smart enough to turn it off. So as soon as you get into talking points, and it's why people don't, it's why when they come to our podcast, they listen to us and then they skip the Democratic elected, or they don't tune on. And I've seen it with YouTube, especially. Like, I've had Democratic electeds who I love, who I think are great, and people just don't want to hear them because they're not going to say anything that they can hold on to. And
Right.
this is a moment where the American people desperately want an opposition party. Not even want, they need it desperately, right? Voters desperately need someone to oppose Trump. They don't like the authoritarianism. They don't like it. They don't like this kind of, rolling back of the Constitution. This is, nobody wants this, but Democrats are so afraid of their own shadows. They cannot go out there with real sentences about real things that happen in the world. And so they are polling almost as badly as Trump is.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny you talk about the Constitution, and we had Donald Trump over the weekend, I guess on Meet the Press, being asked if he sees it as his job to uphold the Constitution, and he said he didn't know. And I flashed back to all my high school, I guess what you would put in an umbrella term, civics classes, and I was apparently taught wrong, because I was taught that the president is supposed to uphold the Constitution, and not to say I don't know if that's my job as president to uphold the Constitution. So I have calls into all my high school teachers. I left very nasty emails for them,
Yeah.
yelling at them for teaching me very wrong stuff about America.
My favorite part of that interview is actually, my favorite part of the whole sort of gestalt of it is that today I was on Morning Joe and Peter Baker said, 100+ days ago, this guy made an oath on the Bible to protect the Constitution, right? This is Peter Baker. He is
Mhm.
on the news side of the New York Times, right? He is a sort of very old school reporter. And he is saying, my man made an oath to the Bible 100 days ago. Like, when you have the straight reporters at the New York Times being like, what the fuck? You have really crossed a Rubicon. Um, and it's bad. I mean, I also would add, there were like, it's so interesting because, like, this is Donald Trump. He is obsessed with the mainstream media. He has said so many, this year he said what the mainstream media does should be illegal. He said, I mean, he has been targeting the press, targeting the press, targeting the press. He sits down for 4 interviews. Okay. Like, imagine if Biden, after 100 days, had sat down for 4 interviews. Think about how much better everything would have been, right? Because, first of all, you would have had people would understand chips and sciences, right? Chips and
Right.
sciences was all about onshoring manufacturing. Onshoring manufacturing, which is why Trump has enacted these insane tariffs, right? Because everyone has seen there's a real problem with manufacturing. We need to onshore manufacturing. We get it. But the problem is, you really want to onshore the good manufacturing jobs like the semiconductors and not the bad manufacturing jobs like jeans, right? If you're going to work in a semiconductor factory, that's better than working in a garment factory, which is lower paying and also more, it's just much better. You'd rather make semiconductors. So, okay, if we had had Biden, imagine if Biden had sat for NBC, ABC, Time Magazine, and also The Atlantic. Imagine what would have happened if he had sat for those 4 interviews. Like, it would have been a totally different trajectory. 100 days, we would have had 4 interviews to look at what he had done over the first 100 days. And it would have meant that he would have been, and it's like what you see with Trump. And again, no fan of Trump's, but, pool sprays, talking to people, just constantly talking to the media, televised, these insane North Korean style televised cabinet meetings, but
Yeah.
they're good because people get to see what's happening.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
I've been saying for a while, and I'm not the only one. To me, at this point, Trump is he's basically a figurehead, and that's his purpose now, is to be trotted out for these, pseudo ersatz cabinet meetings, and to go to the Super Bowl, and to go to the Daytona 500, and to be like, nobody thinks that Trump is sitting in policy meetings, doing deep dives on, he's no economist like you,
Right.
Molly, is I think what I'm
Yes,
trying to say.
exactly.
And he knows, and the people around him know, that there's a sizable portion of the American public that responds to stuff like that, like you said, that responds to these cabinet meetings, and we look at these things and we're like, this is deranged, which they
Right.
objectively are.
My hottest take is that Democrats should do televised cabinet meetings, which I know everyone's
Do
going
you
to get
think they
mad at
should
me.
have? Do you think they should have like
100%.
a shadow government? People have
Yes.
suggested that they do like a
Yes.
British style.
Every fucking day. I'm like, come on, man. Have
Yeah,
briefings. You're offering people nothing,
right.
and you don't understand why they're not happy.
Yeah,
Don't offer them nothing. A really good example is like AOC and Bernie. The reason that they are popular is because they are doing things.
hmm,
If you read these polls, it's like, we want Democrats to do things.
yeah,
Chris Murphy, great example, doing gazillions of videos, putting himself out there. You either are going to, and again, I think really a great example too has been Governor
Pritzker.
Pritzker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because he says it's not left, it's not right, it's fight or cave. And we're seeing a lot of caving.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing when you talk about having like a Democratic shadow cabinet and shadow ministers, and however they do it in England, which I am a fan of just because I think it sounds cool,
Yeah.
but also you got to have the horses. And I don't need Chuck Schumer leading a shadow government and being all Chuck Schumery. I don't need Hakeem Jeffries, who's been, quite frankly, to me, has been very disappointing as House Majority Leader. You need the AOCs, the Bernies, the Pritzkers, the Waltzes, I think Elizabeth Warren has been out there. Pete, like you said, people
Right.
like that, then yes. But my fear is that the fact, I've been saying this a lot, the fact that we can name off the Democrats who have been out there doing this is bad. We should
Yeah.
not be able to sit here and in 5 seconds name all of the ones who are doing it. It needs to be a party-wide strategy, and it just doesn't seem like they're up for it.
It's both bad and okay. Here's what I would say. I think we need more push from Democrats for sure. But here's the thing. Somebody is going to come in there and be the nominee. Okay. It may not be someone from the party. It may have to be an outside person. If they can't fucking get their shit together, I hope we can curse here, then
Yeah.
it'll be some outside person. Is that for the best? No, I don't think so. I think it's nuts. But there is a power vacuum right now on the left. So either they fill it or they don't. And I mean, I can't, I have hit the level of apoplectic where I'm beyond apoplectic, where I'm just like, this is going to go how it's going to go. Right.
Yeah.
I think that there have been just a number of opportunities squandered by leadership on all sides. And part of it is fear. I think part of it is this sort of inability to, like, for example, here's a really good example. So Jeffries has, there was this reporting last week that Jeffries had told people not to go to El
Right.
Salvador.
Right.
Jeffries is pushed back, said, no, that's not true. People can go to El Salvador. Okay. The pushback was bigger than the story,
Yeah.
right? You could have, you clearly, they can get the message out if they want.
Right.
So here's a question. And then the other thing is like the pushback was like this, like very legalese press releasey
Of
kind of
course. Of
reader
course.
Jeffries says, da da da.
Yeah.
What about just saying like, obviously what's happening in El Salvador is a political, humanitarian, aesthetic, moral disaster, and we expect our leaders, our members to fight. What about something like that? Why can't we just speak like human beings, like
Yeah.
with real words and not like this McKinsey-ish, like, all couched in ridiculousness? And I
Yeah.
think that is the real question. And I think that's the real legacy for that's sort of what Democrats need to do is, I mean, I don't know what they need to do, but and I hate when people tell Democrats what they need to do because honestly, but as a human, I would like people to do more human talking. That's my that's my goal.
Yeah. Well, I think what we've learned here and what we've known, I think, is that none of these people could hack it as a podcast host. So let's just leave it at that. Molly, thank you
I
so much for
mean,
coming on. People go check out Fast Politics, read Molly at Vanity Fair. And again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, Miles.
thank you.
Folks, I am super excited to have as my inaugural guest for the new podcast, As the World Churns, Mary Trump, New York Times bestselling author, the CEO and founder of Mary Trump Media, the just my friend, the incomparable, the brilliant Mary Trump, who provides so much insight and analysis to all of us to help us not lose our minds on a regular basis. I know that you don't think that you do that because you're like, aren't we losing our minds on a regular basis? But Mary, so here we are. We've passed the threshold of the 100 days of Donald Trump's second regime. You and I and our friends collectively told the world, do not give this man another pass at power. Do not give him back the keys because the second time gonna be worse than the first time. But people don't like to listen to smart women and people of
No,
color and black
no.
folks and queer folks. So here we are. I want to just take your pulse on how do you even sum up for yourself where we are 3 months plus in to this second regime?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm so happy about your new show. Congratulations. It is well deserved. And I wish you all the success. Uh, you are one of the essential voices. So I'm happy to be here, but also, as you know, thrilled to have you part of Maritime Media
Yes.
and a lifelong Nerd Avenger. And I do think that to a person, we have been on the right side of this. I think all of us, to one degree or another, years and years ago, were saying things like, if Donald Trump gets back into office, it will be the end of the American experiment. So, how am I feeling about where we are slightly more than 100 days into the second Trump regime? I'm feeling that things are unfolding exactly as we anticipated and knew they would. Can we say that perhaps some things happened at an accelerated pace? Sure, because I think that, the big question mark for a while has been, are there guardrails? Will they hold? What kind of pushback will there be? To what extent can the judiciary slow things down, et cetera? Like there were just some things we couldn't know until they were happening. And I'm not going to pretend that I haven't been shocked by some of it. But again, not because it wasn't anticipated, but because there's something very different about watching things unravel in real time
Yeah.
versus anticipating that they're going to. And even though we knew what Donald Trump and his enablers were going to do to our agencies, to the rule of law, et cetera, it's very different to watch the Department of Justice, for example, be completely dismantled and turned into Donald Trump's personal law firm that is not there anymore to uphold and protect civil rights for all Americans, that is not there to uphold and protect the rule of law. It's there simply to do his bidding. That's a different feeling from knowing in the not too distant future it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that for me to intellectualize what we thought would happen and it actually happened, but to now feel it, like this is the thing that I keep, talking about, particularly on my Substack, is like the feeling around this.
Yeah.
The way that my body feels, how exhausted I am, how like I vacillate into these spaces of depression and darkness, and like that I could not plan for and anticipate, right?
Yeah.
And so it's seeing these things, and I think that we are, people like, no, well, we need to fight and we need to resist, and yes, but we also need to feel what is happening. And so when I see, for instance, the Pope just passed, right? I'm not a Catholic. I don't need to be Catholic to like be mourning, right? With millions of tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people who lost their leader, right? Um and be know enough to know that this is a mournful period of time for so many. For Donald Trump, it was an opportunity to play dress up with AI and post out an image before conclave even begins in this time of mourning for millions and millions of people around the world. Like, what does that say about the psyche of this individual? And also, the White House account reposts it.
Yeah. It is shocking in the sense that it hasn't gotten more pushback. But I think one of the problems we've been dealing with for a long time, Danielle, is that according to corporate media, every awful thing about Donald Trump is just already baked in and we don't need to pay attention to it. However, the depredations get worse and different, like qualitatively different. So we're not dealing with the same negative things about him. He's pushing the envelope. He's doing much worse things, and still, nothing's getting enough attention because, on the one hand, as you say, it's offensive. It's deeply offensive what he's done. It's deeply disturbing how many people there are who do not have the issues he has, which I'll get to in a second, willing to amplify his insanity.
Mm-hmm.
But also troubling to me is that, I mean, it would be bad enough if it were a joke, right? If he were just playing dress up, AI cosplay, and saying, hey, how cool do I look as a pope? Um, but what's worse to me is that on some level, he actually means it. I'm
Yes.
not saying that he thinks that he can be pope, although who knows? I'm saying that he thinks he should be. Donald Trump thinks that he's better than everybody else, that he can do every job better than everybody else. And that's because he's never had to do anything in his life. He's never had to prove anything. He's been enabled all along. He's failed upward so spectacularly. And it's just nobody notices anymore how deeply, profoundly disturbing and disturbed this kind of behavior is. So what does it say about his supporters? What does it say about a media that continues to fail us on a daily basis?
I mean, it continues to say that clicks are more important than our country, right? That using Donald Trump for the last 10 years as clickbait, as a way to sell your network, sell whatever, sell your ads, um, increase the profit share for your shareholders, was more important than journalism. The only industry that is named in our Constitution is the press, right? Because the founding fathers knew how important the press was to the foundation of democracy, right? If the people don't have the truth shared with them, if politicians are not to be held accountable by the people, then what separates them from the monarchy that they fled?
Right. Yeah. And what's equally horrifying is that the very institution whose job it is essentially to defend our democracy and make sure that it's strong and viable, cannot exist without a strong democracy. And yet they are unwilling to take the threats seriously. And I know that there's a tricky line to walk. On the one hand, Donald Trump, sadly, tragically, is president of the United States of America. He can't be ignored. That is just not possible. But what I've been wondering about for a long time is why is the assessment always made that you'll get more clicks if you repost his stuff without any critical commentary? Like, why wouldn't posting that picture and saying, "This is insanity. This person is so deeply unwell and must be removed," like, that's not gonna get clicks too? But it never happens. It's just, "Oh, this is something Donald did." Okay. I that's the part I don't get. Like, I would think that pushback would
Mm-hmm.
be
Mm-hmm.
just as interesting to the American people, or I should say analysis that takes into account the truth of what's going on and doesn't pretend that just because he's president that anything he does is normal, which is where we seem to be right now, and I don't get it. I do not get it. I would think that hard-hitting critiques of his behavior and the impact his egregious policies are having on the American people would also get notice, but apparently I don't understand anything about corporate media.
Apparently we don't, which is why we're independent. But but the last question that I have for you, is it's a big one, which is I can't see 6 months from now. I cannot wrap my mind where we will be 6 months from now. And so I'm curious as to how quickly we have watched our country crumble, and we're literally just walking amongst the rubble of America, of our democracy that continues to just fall around us. Where do you see in 6 months from now?
Well, I'm with you. One of the hardest things, just on a human level, I think we've all had to deal with, is that inability to see beyond. I felt this way very strongly in September and October of 2020. The outcomes of that election were so diametrically opposite. Like, it's one way if Biden gets in, it's another way if Donald gets back in. They're so different. I literally could not see beyond election day. It was like a black wall, and it's very difficult to exist as a human when you can't think beyond. You can't think into the future.
Mhm.
It was very paralyzing, and I feel similarly now. I can't see beyond the second 100 days, let alone 6 months, which is a little over 3 months. I because it is one of the most awful, and I guess you could say diabolically brilliant things about what's happened is the, um, the speed and comprehensiveness of what they've managed to do, because remember, they've been planning it for 8 years.
Yep.
So, they were ready to go. So, I think one thing that's important for us to do, first of all, is realize that this really isn't about Donald Trump at all. This is about what he's being allowed to do. So we need to assign blame where this is the fascist Republican Party who is rubber stamping all of this, and which has, I mean, the Republicans in Congress have ceded all of their constitutional responsibility. They've failed the American people on a daily basis. This is also down to the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court, which decided in its infinite wisdom to put Donald Trump beyond the reach of the rule of law. And now he is literally using what was a storied institution, as imperfect as it was, the Department of Justice, to attack his perceived political enemies and erode the rule of law even further. So, who do we need to focus on? Because I don't think it's Donald Trump anymore. How do we pivot? And what do we do knowing, okay, here we are. It's unimaginable to many people what happened in the first 100 days. It's unimaginable to many of us what's going to happen in the second 100 days. We have to assume that all of the degradation will continue, that they will come up with new, creative, even more petty and cruel ways to
Yep.
attack people and erode our rights, civil and otherwise, to dismantle the Constitution, because of course they will, to do worse at the Department of Justice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if we know that, let's let go of trying to imagine and just assume there is no worst. It will always get worse. If Donald
Mm.
Trump is involved, there is no bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So let's plan accordingly. Does it really matter what the details are? No. What the goal is for the United States to be weakened, isolated, and no longer a functioning democracy. We don't want that to happen. So what do we need to do to prevent that? And you and I and many others have been, not enough, but some others anyway, have been talking about this, I think, since day one of the transition. Yes, we need protests. Yes, the protests need to be more frequent and they need to be bigger. They need to get to the point where they're constant. And I see that starting to happen. The protests are important in order to alert people the seriousness of what we're facing. However, ultimately, what's going to need to happen is that we are going to need to come together as a people and shut everything down.
Down. Yeah. My friend, Mary Trump, with the absolute next steps, the thing that I myself have been saying, if we do not have a national strike, if we do not shut this shit down, it will continue. And we can't even imagine what worse is in this moment. Thank you, my friend, for being my very first guest on As the World Churns. I appreciate you so, so very much.
Well, right back at you. And again, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. And I cannot wait to see what happens next. And I'm happy to come back anytime.
Thank you. Folks, back by popular demand, apparently everyone's favorite segment, Fuck That Guy, is back with As the World Churns. So, Andy, to start off this week and our new pod, who is your Fuck That Guy?
So, Danielle, you probably remember that my last Fuck That Guy on the previous podcast was a woman, because I am, as always, an ally. So I wanted to kick off the new podcast, also with a woman, and that woman is Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer is one of those people that you used to not have to know too much about, other than she was the crazy person who chained herself to the Twitter headquarters at one point because she was mad that she got banned or something like that. I think she was also famous for there was a video came out of her trying to hit on, I want to say Jack Posobiec. If it wasn't him, it was some other neo-Nazi. Now we all have to know who she is because she has the ear of the president. And she has been instrumental in Trump firing some national security personnel, including possibly Mike Waltz. There's a lot of people think that she had something to do with that. So anyway, she was doing her radio show, and I guess she has beef with Representative Shri Thanadar. And so she started off by, she said, I'm not saying all Indians are scammers. Obviously, there's great Indians out there, but that stereotype's out there, right? They say stereotypes exist for a reason. So she goes on to accuse Shri Thanadar of being a stereotype. And then she says of Thanadar's district, she says, I mean, if it's such a heavy immigrant community, it'd be nice to have an American there, like a real blood and soil American. For people who don't know, blood and soil was a Nazi slogan referring to like the purity of the white Aryan race, the purity of the blood, and then the purity of the soil coming from, Germany. And so here she is talking about real blood and soil Americans, just using Nazi slogans like they're nothing. And then she goes on to say, I prefer not to have immigrants in Congress. I think that there should be a rule created that says that only US born individuals can run for office or hold office in our country, just like the rule that applies to the president. I mean, the biggest troublemakers in Congress happen to be immigrants. Look at Ilhan Omar, okay? I think she's the poster child for why we need an immigration moratorium. But Representative Thanadar is another example of how hostile a lot of these immigrants can be when they come to our country and we allow them to hold office. They should not be tolerated, in my opinion. So here is this woman who, again, has the ear of the president. She's in meetings with Donald Trump. She's telling him, you got to fire these people. And then he's firing people. Here she is spouting Nazi slogans, talking about how immigrants in Congress are troublemakers and should not be tolerated and should not be allowed in Congress. And unfortunately, unlike, I don't know, even five years ago or so, 10 years ago, when she really wasn't anybody's problem, she just was this, like I said, this person who is clearly not well, doing goofy things. Uh, Now she's doing serious things because she is close to Donald
Mm-hmm.
Trump. And here she is, with her blood and soil. And so I give her a big old fuck that guy.
Laura Loomer is a waste of space. She is a disgusting, disgraceful human being. Maybe she should point her attention to the immigrant that is undoing democracy, which would be Elon Musk, and think about that. And oh, I don't know, all of Donald Trump's wives, current and past. But, you can't make sense out of nonsense and fuckery, which is what she is. So for so many reasons and so many other things that I could say, but I am a woman with class. Fuck that guy.
Proud of you, Danielle,
You're
as
welcome.
always.
Thank you.
All right, so go ahead, close this out for the inaugural episode of As the World Churns. Who is your fuck that guy?
So there is a person who I did not want to cover, which is a racist white piece of trash who took it upon herself to hurl racist slurs, comments at a 5-year-old Black boy who also happens to be autistic. And the entire event, the heinous event by Shiloh Hendricks, which is this trash's name, was caught on camera. So this woman started a give, send, go on a Christian website, which just makes it even better to use your faux Christianity to hold up white supremacy and racism, the same site that funded Kyle Rittenhouse. Miss me with your bullshit Christianity. Like a disgrace, a disgrace. To think that this piece of shit would disparage and harm a child and other people see that. And instead of it being a point of disgrace and a point of camaraderie around who you shouldn't want to be, no. She goes the way of George Zimmerman, who sold the gun that murdered teenager Trayvon Martin, goes the way of the other piece of shit who became center stage during the RNC, the McCloskeys, and these people who turned their white nationalist beliefs into a money-making scheme. And so for that reason, this piece of garbage is my fuck that guy, as well as all of the people who see fit to send her money, which in any other world, if we had any other president, would be investigated, right? And she would be brought up on charges. But I'm certain that at some point in the Trump regime, she will have a fucking bust in the Capitol, because that's the kind of piece of trash that Donald Trump loves to put a spotlight on and hold up as a hero. So many reasons, I hope that her site is hacked. So many reasons, because no money should enter into that woman's hands. She's my fuck that guy.
First of all, I can't get past the fact that it's a Christian fundraising site. So the Washington Post asked the founder of that site, if he had any comment about this. And he said, yeah, we're aware of the concerns, so we turned off comments for her fundraiser. That was their answer. Not to say maybe we shouldn't have this woman use our site, our quote unquote Christian site, to raise money for repeatedly calling a 5-year-old autistic black child the N-word. His solution to all this, to dealing with the concerns, was to turn off comments. So just everybody involved in this is just absolute garbage, except the child, obviously. But yeah, oh God, this woman, yeah, fuck that guy.